Okay, let's call the meeting to order. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 18, and the Governor's June 16, 2021 revised order extending remote participation by all members in any meeting of a public body. This meeting of the Great Barrington Selectboard will be conducted via remote participation to the greatest extent possible. Specific information and general guidelines for remote participation by members of the public and of parties with a right and a requirement to attend this meeting can be found on the town's website. For this meeting, members of the public who wish to listen to the meeting may do so in the following manner. And that's on the agenda, and I assume you all know how because you're in the meeting. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means. Pursuant to Mass General Law 7C 30A Section 20F, after notifying the chair of the public body, any person may make a video or audio recording of an open session of a meeting of a public body or may transmit the meeting through any medium. Beginning of the meeting, the chair shall inform other attendees of any such recording. So this meeting is being recorded by the town, by CTSB, and by Berkshire Edge and other members of the public. Any member of the public wishing to speak at the meeting must receive permission of the chair. The listing of agenda items of those reasonably anticipated by the chair which may be discussed at the meeting. Not all items listed may in fact be discussed, and other items not listed may be brought up for discussion to the extent permitted by law. So this meeting, we're going to take a little bit out of order, but we will start with select board announcement and statements. And I have a few things to say, which probably will take some people's thunder away, but there were 3 events this weekend that I just want to thank people for. One is the Great Barrington Firefighters Association for the car show on Thursday evening, and Wheeler and Taylor for the fireworks at the end of the car show. It was a great local event. It was a great public event and well organized, and it was just a lot of fun. This is another weekend of Berkshire Busk, which has been a tremendous boon for downtown Great Barrington, and I want to thank the organizers and the sponsors. And third, we were fortunate enough yesterday to have Jacob's Pillow pop-up performance on the road, and that was wonderful, well attended, and I just want to thank everyone who participated in that. And so Great Barrington is just very busy, and it's terrific to see how great things are downtown and throughout the town. Select board's announcements or statements. Garfield.
Get sound out of me, it's just fine.
Yeah, no, there's an echo.
I'm all set right at the moment. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you. Eric.
Just wanted to say thanks to Paul and Dan and everybody at Tap Farms for putting it out there that residents from Housatonic that are experiencing the brownish water are welcome to come and fill up their jugs for potable water from one of their artesian wells out front. I thought that was a nice gesture and greatly appreciated.
I second that nice gesture.
Very nice. Ed, nothing. And I have nothing. So we're going to move to licenses and permits as we did the last meeting. We'll get those done. The first one is Lauren Farron for the Berkshire International Film Festival, who's requested a parking moratorium for September 9th through the 13th. We've done this for the last few years, at least, probably more than a few. Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Do I have a second?
Second.
So I have a motion by Ed, a second by Garfield. Any discussion? And so I have one person with their hands up, which I believe is Lindsay Schmidt. Go right ahead, Lindsay.
Hi, I'm actually at Lindsay's house. So it is Lauren speaking. And if you have any questions for me, just let me know. But I appreciate the cooperation and the support Great Barrington has had. We're celebrating our 15th anniversary this year. And so we couldn't do it without the support of Great Barrington. So thank you.
Yeah, we appreciate everything you do for the town also, Lauren. So I have a motion and a second. Roll call vote. Garfield?
Aye.
Eric?
Aye.
Ed?
Aye.
And it's unanimous. You may notice Lee is not here tonight. She is away, so this was a planned event. We next have Lauren Farron of the Berkshire International Film Festival, permission to hang banners on the Main Street and Railroad Street. Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
So I have a motion by Ed, a second by Garfield. Any discussion? Seeing none, the roll call vote. Garfield?
Aye.
Eric?
Aye.
Ed?
Aye.
And aye, it's unanimous. Lauren Farron of the Berkshire International Film Festival, 2 one-day all-alcoholic licenses for Thursday, September 9th from 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. and Saturday, September 11th from 5 p.m. to 9 p.m. Do I have a motion?
Oh, sorry, motion to approve.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Motion by Ed, second by Garfield. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote. Garfield?
Aye.
Aye.
Ed?
Aye.
And aye, it's unanimous. Good luck this year, Lauren.
Thank you.
Take care. Thank you for
Thank
everything.
you so much.
Kate McCormick for TireKickers.com, Class 2 auto licenses, formerly Fastback Motors LLC at 20 Castle Street. We recognize Kate. Go ahead.
Hi, everybody. Kate McCormick, John Marcus. I'm here on behalf of TireKickers.com LLC. Tire Kickers is what was formerly known as Fastback Motors LLC, and we were before you in 2020 to get a secondhand motor vehicles license to sell, buy, and exchange Class 2 automobiles for the property that is commonly known as the old fire station at 20 Castle Street. If you look at the application, and just to refresh the members that had been on the board, brief explanation to the new board members, the back portion, non-historic portion of the firehouse has been used for this this secondhand vehicle sales. It's actually for classic cars. The request was for approximately 5 classic cars, no more than 10 at its max capacity. The agreement was that they would be stored inside of the building. We had a sign requirement that we have met, and it's up. And this was just one of those renewals that was not at the top of the pile for 2021 due to COVID and other things that were going on. So this is just to request for the 2021 license to be granted so that we are up and running. We just delivered the bond to the town, so the bond's in place. There is a copy in the package of the lease that was assigned from it's actually not assigned, it just makes reference to the fact that TireKickers.com LLC is the new entity of Fastback. And it's basically a name change and then a request for the 2021 license.
Thank you, Kate. Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Any discussion? Seeing none, a roll call vote. Garfield? You're muted, Garfield. It may be frozen.
Aye.
Thank you. Eric?
Aye.
Ed?
Aye.
And aye, it's unanimous. Thank you very much, Kate.
Thank you very much. Have a good evening.
You can use this one if you want.
So next is the town manager's report. So I just want to,
That's where.
before we start the Housatonic Waterworks DPC report, I just want to go through the same, the rules that we had when we did ACOM. So tonight we're going to have a report by DPC And then we will simply take questions about the report while the people who wrote the report are here. This will not be a night for discussion yet. We're getting there. This is the last of the two reports. And both public and select board will ask questions. Next meeting, when Lee's here, we'll set a date for a meeting to start the discussion about the process, about where we want to go from here. We could discuss it starting at the next meeting. It just depends how big the agenda is, because I want to give lots of time to do this. I don't want to give it any, 20 minutes. I want to make sure we have enough time. So tonight we'll simply listen to the report, and then we will ask questions, clarifying questions, Housatonic and Great Barrington residents, and then we will start our process discussion at a time very shortly, and hopefully we'll move this along. So Mark, town manager should report.
Okay, thanks, Steve. I'm going to repeat a few things that you just mentioned. So staff members from DPC Engineering are here tonight to present the second and final report on the Housatonic Waterworks system. The first report presented by AECom on July 12th is posted on the Housatonic Waterworks tab of our website, and a video recording of that presentation can also be found on CTSB TV's website for those that missed it and would like to get caught up on that. Tonight's presentation slides from DPC were posted not only in the packet on Friday of last week, but they're also already posted on the Housatonic Waterworks tab of our website as well. So anyone looking to get a copy of those can find them easily on our website. So I'll, at this point, turn it over to Dave and his team. Let them get started.
Thanks, Mark. Is it possible to provide screen share to Justin for the presentation this evening?
I think I have it right now, Dave.
You have it. All right. Excellent.
Let's see. People can let me know if you see the first cover slide here.
We do.
Yes.
Great. Thank you. All right, Dave.
Just trying to get my video up and running. I got booted. There we go. Okay. All right. Thank you for having us this evening. Just to add on to Mark's intro, which I had cut out on the beginning there. We're here this evening to present a summary of our observations related to the opinion of value, costs, and capital implementation alternatives for Housatonic Waterworks. We were contracted by the town of Great Barrington. And as Justin progresses along these slides, certainly if the board has any questions, you can certainly feel free to interject. Otherwise, we can respond to things at the end of the evening.
Mm-hmm. All right.
So this evening, we'll present an overview of the project, including why the town chose to do this project and what the scope was. We'll summarize the key sources of information that were utilized in our findings. We'll present our value, and I'll use the word opinion of value, of the Housatonic Waterworks system. We'll summarize the implementation alternatives that would be available based on the capital plan that AECom presented last month. Talk about some next steps. And then at the end, answer any questions that the select board and public may have. In terms of the purpose and scope of the project, we started by reviewing available information. After that, we developed, again, what our estimated value or current day value of the Housatonic Waterworks system is. And then we came up with two implementation alternatives. One is what might happen for the town or Housatonic Waterworks on their own, a standalone utility. And the second would be what would happen if Housatonics was combined with the other water utility in Great Barrington. I'm going to come back to this in a second and just provide an overview of where Great Barrington residents get their water right now. And I think that'll put some context together. And then based on all of those things, the last thing is for us to put together our opinion of estimated value, identify what the capital plan exposure would be for whichever entity might be managing the water utility, whether current or future, summarize the management risks associated with that, and identify possible next steps. So in terms of where residents currently get their water in town, I think it's important to understand that generally speaking, it's one of three areas. First off, the town of Great Barrington is not in the public water business right now. There are two private semi-public water utilities. The first, Housatonic Waterworks, completely private utility, serves the village of Housatonic and has a relatively small customer base. The second is Great Barrington Fire District, which serves the downtown and Great Barrington major part of the community. It has a larger customer base, albeit still a small utility on its own. And then the last category are those homes that are on the fringes of the community that might not be connected to either public water system and have private wells for their drinking water. So this is important to understand in terms of where things are at now and where they could go in the future. In terms of the information that was utilized to prepare our summary, first, we had done an initial very preliminary evaluation back in 2016-17, which culminated with a presentation in 2018 with the Selectboard. It seemed like forever ago, only 3 years. Time Bond publishes a water rates survey for the state of Massachusetts, and that's generally updated every couple of years. So that data was used in terms of benchmarking the Housatonic Waterworks rates and where their customers are at now. And lastly, and certainly very important, AECOM presented their 2021 water system evaluation report a month ago. And it was good that they did, because we saw a lot of the same things in their report that we had talked about a few years earlier, and we're building off the same data sets. So again, just to reiterate, as we talk about things this evening, this is not an appraisal of value. We're not appraisers. This is our engineering opinion, our professional opinion of the value of the system, what the capital plan might look like, and our opinion of how that would impact the customers and residents of Great Barrington. Okay, so this is where we get into some math this evening. Hopefully folks have had a chance to get a little caffeine in their bodies, but we'll walk through it, and we can certainly come back and peel the onion if we need to get through any of the steps. There are basically 4 steps that we use to evaluate the current day value of the Housatonic Waterworks system. First, we figured out how much would it cost to construct a brand new system today if it were constructed today. The second step we did is we converted the current day cost to past day costs using dates of installation. A good chunk, if not the majority, of the water system up there is pretty old. It's pretty mature. So by converting current day costs to past day costs, we establish a baseline. Then once we have the baseline from current to past day costs, we then depreciate the past day costs to current day conditions. And that essentially is where we'll talk about the current day value. And when we talk about value, we look at, what is this system worth today as compared to how much work does it need? And that's the last step, where we take a look at value versus the exposure associated with a capital plan. And there is a pretty robust capital plan that's been identified by AECOM, similar order of magnitude to what we projected 4 years ago. And it's something that's important, whether it's for the current water utility or for a future management or utility that might be dealing with that customer base in the future. You have to figure out how much it's going to cost to fix what you have and how much it's going to cost the residents or the users. So as we go through these steps, step 1, so if an entity, Housatonic Waterworks, were to construct their entire system brand new from scratch today under public bidding scenario, it would cost approximately $55 million. So that's comprised of 3 categories that you'll see in this table, which will be echoed in the following steps. But you have supply and treatment. So you have the surface water supply that currently exists, and you have the treatment plant that processes the water and makes it drinking water ready. Then you have a storage element, which is used to not only store the water, but provide a consistent pressure to the system. And lastly, distribution. So these are all the pipes that run through the streets and neighborhoods from the treatment plant all the way down to all the homes and businesses in Housatonic. And you can see that the majority of the cost to construct the system are the pipes, the network of all of the pipes that would be underneath all those streets. So $55 million, keep that one in your hat. That's how much it would cost to construct today. Step 2. So what we did here was we brought things back to past day costs. So we converted the $55 million back to a cost at a time when each element was installed. And obviously the system was installed over a number of different times. The treatment plant itself is pretty old. It was upgraded in 1997, about 20 plus years ago, along with the storage tank. But the pipes in the system, based on the AECOM report and data that we observed, the pipes have an average age of 1958. So that's up there relative to, I mean, it is New England. It's an old mill town. You'd expect to see old infrastructure just like you would in Great Barrington proper. But it starts to tell you as we move forward in this analysis that the asset is a good chunk of the asset is at the end of its useful life. So that past day cost, if you convert things from current day numbers back to when they were actually constructed, the system had a value when it was originally constructed of $17 million at the various years when it was constructed. And we're on to step 3. So in step 3, we take the $17 million past cost. And again, this is our opinion of what we think these numbers are. We take a look at what the estimated design life is for the various components, and we assume 50 years for treatment and 50 years for storage, and we assume 100 years for pipes, typically for ductile iron or cast iron. That's at the high end, but we wanted to provide the benefit of doubt and not be overly conservative. When we provide the depreciation based on when things were constructed in the past to current day, we estimate that the existing water system has a current day depreciated value of just under $6 million. So if we were to construct it, just to recap, if we were to construct the entire system today, it would cost $55 million. If we could go in our time machine and construct the parts of the system when they were actually built, it would be $17 million in past. And as we depreciate it on a linear basis based on the life expectancy of each asset, it takes us down to a current day value of $5.8 million. Okay, so that's your value, $6 million. So you say to yourself, the system absolutely has a value. It's an asset. It serves the residents of Housatonic. However, when you start to look at what the management utilities exposure is, AECOM identified a $31 million capital plan over the next 20 years. Just for the sake of comparison, back in 2017, we identified, I think it was a $23 million capital plan. And these are the same order of magnitude numbers that came up. It isn't rocket science. It's the majority of the pipes are really old. They're really old, and a lot of them are really, really small. Current day design standards would dictate that you install no less than an 8-inch diameter water main anywhere, and it's for a combination of reasons. Hydraulic conditions, fire flow during an emergency, fire that could occur, and there's a lot of money associated with fixing those old and really undersized pipes. So when you look at your net value by comparing current value versus capital plan, in our opinion, the system has an overall negative value in terms of over the next 20 years. There's a heck of a lot more that needs to be put into it than it's currently worth. So that helps to provide some context for possible discussions as things move along. Value is completely driven by each person's interpretation of data, depending on where they stand. But our opinion is that the system has negative value when compared to the capital plan. So that's a whole bunch of good news so far, right? Potentially big problem. How might the town get involved to consider helping the residents of Housatonic, which have asked for the town to take a look at this? And that's where we kind of turn to, okay, well, what does this mean in terms of actual cost to each homeowner moving forward? Okay, and again, I apologize. You ask an engineer to try to summarize what's in their mind, and they come up with some funny-looking graphics. But I'll take a second to try to put this in context. So I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, we looked at two management alternatives for the implementation of the capital plan. So the value was established if the entity was to construct the capital plan as has been presented by AECOM. We believe there are two methods to achieve that. The first of which is Housatonic Waterworks continues to be a standalone entity, whether under current leadership or future leadership. If the capital plan is presented in the AECOM report were implemented, what would the rates look like to those users in solely Housatonic Waterworks over the next 20 years? So on this figure, we have a horizontal axis which represents fiscal years from current out through FY 2042. On the vertical axis, we have total dollars paid per water customer per year. And I say total dollars paid per water customer because we did show both current conditions for Housatonic Waterworks and current conditions for Great Barrington Fire District. They are two separate utilities, but they're the only two water systems in the town. So it's important to understand what each of those entities pays, approximately. As you can see, the GB Fire District rates are much lower. To their credit, they have a lot more customers too. So anytime you have a bigger denominator when you're looking at unit costs per household, that helps. The blue lines represent our opinion of what the rates would look like, approximated over that 20-year period. The AECOM report recommended 3 sets of capital plans. One was about $15 million in years 0 through 6. The next was, I think, $14 million in years 5 to 10 or something like that. And the last one was $3 million between like years 11 and 20. So there's 3 steps that you see in the blue bars as you go from left to right. You have inflation and the cost to operate your system, which goes up a little bit every year, just like the select board's experienced on the wastewater side, very common. You definitely understand that element from running your wastewater system. On this graph, you also see 2 things that are important. The green dashed line represents the average statewide cost in Massachusetts for water customers. So again, perception and reality, it doesn't really matter. Each utility has to meet its own financial needs, but it's nice to know where you stack up relative to other communities or utilities in the state. So on average, right now, we project Housatonic Waterworks is pretty much right at that state average, but if they implemented the capital plan or another management entity implemented this capital plan, it would dramatically raise the unit cost per household in a staggering manner. Another element that's shown on this figure that's important for the select board and for residents to understand is the entities that we would reach out to provide grants and long-term low-interest loans, like USDA, for example. They use an underwriting criteria that the water or sewer rates, depending on which bucket they're funding, should be no more than 2% annually of median household income. So that red line represents an affordability threshold, if you would. So if the capital plan were implemented, you can see that the water rates for the Housatonic Waterworks customers would start to quickly exceed the affordability threshold. Not surprisingly, this has certainly come up in conversation with Mark and with Sean in terms of concern about, how this could be paid for, let alone solved. So you can see that this is a problem. It's a huge capital plan with just a small, too few customers, and you end up with a really high unit cost per customer to try to achieve this. That's a lot to take in. Let's carry through, and then we can circle back, Justin, if I've pulled anybody down into the weeds with me. So the second kind of management alternative in terms of how do we deal with a capital plan of this magnitude, or how might an entity that we're managing this utility, you say, well, how do you get more customers? Well, Housatonic in its own right may have some opportunities for growth, but it's relatively fixed in terms of the land that's served. So you'd look to other utilities. Are there opportunities to achieve economies of scale by merging with another utility? So under management alternative 2, what we try to do was say, okay, if the 2 water utilities, one up north and one down in Great Barrington Center, were merged by interconnecting pipes, what would that do, number 1, to the capital plan? And number 2, what would that do to the unit cost per household? So you may recall before that we had, Justin, correct me if I'm wrong, a $25 million capital plan?
Yep.
Okay. Under management alternative 2, you increase your capital plan by about $10 million because you're going to run either 1 or 2 pipes from a big pipe in the Great Barrington Fire District all the way up to the Housatonic Waterworks storage tank. And in theory, you'd provide flexibility for that pipe to come back in the other direction, so Great Barrington Fire District would have a redundant water source. Now, there's a whole bunch of things that we'll come back to and talk about that you have to be careful with when you're talking about mixing types of source water, et cetera. This is all just conceptual in nature. But as Justin moves forward, you still have a major deficit here, and actually you increase the deficit of perceived value versus capital plan. It becomes even more negative by $10 million. But under this concept, if we just flip to the next bar chart here. Yeah, the previous one was just a sketch of a concept of how we came up with a number to go from point A to point B. And it was the blue line, which represents an interconnecting pipe concept between the red Great Barrington Fire District and the purple Housatonic Waterworks service area.
Yep.
Okay, so under this bar chart, same exact vertical scale on the x-axis, same exact horizontal scale in years on the, same vertical scale on the y-axis, same timeline in years on the x-axis. The first 3 years, you can see the Great Barrington Fire District annual costs in orange and the Housatonic Waterworks customers annual costs in blue. And then under this concept, the utility is merged and the capital plan is absorbed by both utilities as a single utility, I should say. The challenge, as many of you probably already picking up, is the concept of merging the 2 districts lowers the cost for the customers within Housatonic, but it absolutely raises the cost per household for those that are in Great Barrington Fire District. It just illustrates an example of how you can stretch a higher capital number by using a much higher EDU count or dwelling count. So under this scenario, the conceptual merged utility flirts with the Massachusetts statewide kind of average or median, and it does kind of go up and down, but generally it stays just above it over the 20 years. It does, however, stay under the threshold of affordability, and why that's important is whomever gets involved with this capital plan, if it were to advance, needs to understand that the entities like USDA that provide grants, which make these things affordable at up to 75% grant, they won't underwrite the loan if we're over that 2% threshold. We've directly seen it with some of our other clients, and you want to be kind of as close to that as you can to get the best grant possible, but if you're way over it, they just won't underwrite the loan. So that's important to understand. So this is a ton to take in. As we kind of move forward and digest the math, I want to just kind of share or summarize some of the observations that we see based on this analysis. So again, back to value. You could get 10 engineers in a room and all 10 of them will give you a different opinion. I'm sure you've worked with a bunch of them and we all think we're right. But at the end of the day, I think most, if not all, would agree that the existing water system in Housatonic is pretty old and mature. And it doesn't have a ton of life left in it, both in terms of sizes of pipes and also the age of when they were constructed. And whether you believe there's a $10, $20, $30 million capital plan to fix that system, our opinion, and we believe it to be factually true, is that we believe the magnitude of the capital plan just far outweighs the value. So from that standpoint, should the town engage in discussions about the future relative to Houstonic Waterworks or those residents, we would just caution you that the asset may have some value on paper, but what's coming in the next 20 years, if you want to right the ship, is significant. In terms of management alternatives to implement the capital plan, alternative one is just not sustainable. I can't imagine. I think those numbers were pushing $3,800, per year for water. That's unheard of in New England. It's definitely not somewhere I would want to be as a resident or as an elected official. So that's a really tough one. That shows you where you don't want to be. The second alternative has some, under a merged utility concept, it has some merit in economies of scale, in potential water supply redundancy, in management and operations, by staff being able to cover kind of more with what you have. But the two big downsides are, groundwater supply and surface water supplies together are a no-no. We've all heard about that in recent years. So there'd be a lot of advanced planning and hydraulics and treatment that would need to come into the fold. And it's a big political, kind of football in terms of you want to make something better for Housatonic residents without making it worse for the Great Barrington Fire District residents. So that's that, that blended capital plan. There's got to probably be a search of a little bit better carrot for Great Barrington Fire District to want to be involved in that kind of solution for their customers, because their rates are pretty sustainable right now and, tend to be a little bit on the low side, which if you're a resident, you enjoy that. So that's kind of the conclusions and takeaways. As you've heard from me and from us, when we talk about sewer rates and things on that side, and Sean's probably heard me say this a million times, both here and in Lennox, is, we don't tell you there's a right answer or a wrong answer. We tell you, here are your options based on your financial goals that you've set. And it's your job to come up with what you believe is the most fair and equitable solution. I would tell you here that my advice is there's a lot of work to be done. I think, Justin, we got one more slide where we kind of cap off on some of this. So if the town of Great Barrington were to continue exploring how they might help the residents of Housatonic, how they might get involved potentially in the future as a water utility or water manager, these are the steps that we'd advise. First off, the town just needs to consider which of those management alternatives it could see itself in. And there's 3 moving parts, right? I mean, it's the town plus 2 private utilities. So it's a bit of a perfect storm there. Public input is going to be huge. There's going to be a lot of kind of sentiment and emotion in here. And there's a long established private water utility that in Housatonic that may have a different opinion of value versus capital, and that needs to be vetted. And as I mentioned, you have a myriad of vested parties here. That doesn't make any discussion easier. And based on those input, of those criteria, the town will then need to decide at that point, step by step, do we want to continue? Does this make sense? There'd obviously need to be a good amount of legal input, let alone permitting and DEP input, et cetera. And then to build on what AECOM did in their report, which I thought was really, really well done, pretty extensive amount of hydraulic water quality analyses, and particularly with management alternative too, to see if that makes sense. And then again, each step, just revisit the recommendations, refine the timeline. No matter what happens, whether it's one of these utilities on their own or the town, if you don't have some major grant input in it, I don't see how anybody would be able to move forward with it. It's a huge undertaking.
Thank you very much, Dave. We have right now 48 people on the line, 40 attendees and 8 panelists. And as I said, now will be time not to make comments, but ask questions about the report. We'll start with Trevor Forbes.
Good evening. Many thanks, Mr. Chairman. Trevor Forbes, 325 North Plain Road, and a user of water that consistently comes out of our faucets, rather looking like caramel rather than what you would normally expect. I'd like to thank you for an excellent presentation. And in a sense, I guess it's both a question and an observation, if you're okay with me pursuing that, Mr. Bannon.
Like Jeopardy, put it in the form of a question, if you would.
I'll try and put it in the form of a question. Looking at the numbers that you've actually presented, it would seem to me that if the residents of Housatonic were faced with the first option that you put together, given the extra amount of cost of the water rate, it would seem to me for those people who are able to afford it, that it might be much more beneficial to them to actually dig a well. The problem with that is that it actually increases the problem between those people in Housatonic who can afford to do that and probably a lot of the Housatonic population who can't afford to do that. So you're then left with not only a huge cost, I would guess, but a cost that actually increases if people feel that they're going to be left with that and they're going to basically face these rising costs. And some of us will probably say, well, in that case, we might just as well dig a well and go private. I'd just like your thoughts on that. The other one is more of a question, I guess, on the basis of this to the select board. And that is why, for example, if I was a resident of Great Barrington and I basically was interested in keeping my water rate as low as possible, would I possibly want to subsidise Housatonic? And what likelihood would there be at an annual meeting of the residents of the Great Barrington town area agreeing to do this? I would think it's probably very limited. So I have some real issues with that. I'd like to ask also a question in relation to the numbers, which are fascinating, complex but fascinating. This tends to suggest to me that Housatonic Waterworks themselves as a private entity have been basically underinvesting in the necessary capital requirements for this system for many years. And I just wonder whether there's any comeback in terms of on the existing owners of Housatonic Waterworks. Those are my questions and observations. Thank you.
I'll answer one question, and you are correct that the select board has to decide the best route to go, and we have to get buy-in from all residents of Great Barrington, Housatonic and Great Barrington, and that's not on tonight's topic. But you're right, that's a conundrum that we are going to be faced with very shortly. Either Dave or Justin, do you want to? I don't know that there's an answer about the well, other than to say that's a very good observation. The ones.
Yeah, agreed. We don't have a direct response to it. It's concerning. I would imagine that residents would look to alternatives under that scenario.
And the problem with doing that, Dave, is that presumably if you've got, any number of people who came out of the Housatonic Waterworks system just makes the problem more of an issue going forward because it actually raises the negative value of the system itself going forward. Correct?
Well, usually what happens when capital is implemented in a utility is that everyone who's connected and already served by a system pays for capital, and the O&M piece is generally based on use. I don't want to speak for what may or may not happen, but generally speaking, when costs are divided, they're often borne amongst all connected parties, whether a resident or business is occupied at the time or not. But that's kind of getting way down the path of.
Yeah, I agree. Let's stick to asking questions of the engineers tonight.
Can I just ask about Trevor's last question?
Yes.
The last question is, clearly there's been an underinvestment for the last 90 years or however long it's been. Is there, I think Trevor's question was, is there a comeuppance for the management, the current management of the
Correct.
Housatonic Waterworks Corporation? Right, in effect, the current ratepayers or whoever gets us to this next $31 million hurdle will be making up for a savings that the previous ratepayers didn't pay. And that is that the fault of the company, and is there just a consequence? And that could be regulations rather than engineering in not your area.
Okay, let's move
I don't think I'd want to go so far as to state who is at fault, but I'd say it's a mature asset. It's, in my professional opinion, I believe that it's past due in terms of the magnitude of the work that needs to get done. But again, it's not super uncommon in New England, especially in these small, we use the term fiefdoms, these little water utilities. You get outside of New England and there's huge mega wastewater utilities, but here we still have a ton of little ones. And it's hard as a water utility too, when you only have a few customers. How do you get capital done? And you have to be creative. So I don't want to spin it that way in terms of who did what. This is where we think things are at now, and this is how we think it should move forward based on what we and AECOM have presented.
Okay, let's move next to Sharon Gregory. Questions, Sharon?
Can you hear me? I'm not sure I did the unmute right.
Okay.
You can hear? Yes. Sharon Gregory, Hollenbeck Avenue. In the projections of the rates going forward for Great Barrington Fire District, have you incorporated what you think is the capital plan that's, would be put forth over the next same period of time? It seems like GBFD has been upgrading some of the pipes, but I don't know, at what rate. It seems like it's further along. So I guess I'm assuming that you didn't put in any big jumps in the GBFD capital plan for pipe replacement. Am I correct?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. Next, we have Doug Stevenson. Go ahead, Doug.
I think I'm unmuted now.
Yes, you are.
Okay. It's Doug Stevenson, 351 North Plain Road. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it would seem to me if someone was trying to establish a fair market value for the Housatonic Water Company, given the numbers you put together in this report, in all likelihood, the Housatonic Water Company would have a negative book value at this point.
Yeah, I believe it likely has some positive book value, but it's like if you were buying a house and you knew that that house needed a new roof and new siding and a couple new bathrooms, you'd probably approach the deal slightly differently. So our opinion is that the capital plan makes it a negative value when you combine both current value plus capital plan. Hopefully I answered that.
So it will be a negative value over a negative net value.
Yeah, to put it simply, if the town through, Mark or Sean came to me and said, Dave, what do you think this asset's worth? We're going to buy it. I'd say get $1 because I wouldn't pay any more than that knowing what's coming down the pipe. And again, that's my opinion, but I believe the liability is far too high to take on something at a price, knowing what you have to do with it after you get it.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Doug. Sharon, you have something else to add? Everyone is allowed to speak once, but we'll let you go. Go ahead, Sharon.
I'm okay, but I would like to just thank the consultants for really excellent work, and I'm a numbers person. Thanks, Steve.
Thank you, Sharon. Anyone else who wants to speak? Michelle? Go right ahead.
Michelle LeBear, 70 Division Street, and a Housatonic Waterworks customer. I was at your presentation a few years ago, and I still have an issue with the Great Barrington Fire District being portrayed as private, because I've attended meetings of the Great Barrington Fire District. As a matter of fact, several years ago, there was a citizens group looking at sewer rates and speaking about tying meters to the water meters and sewer meters together. And at a meeting, we were talking about Housatonic Waterworks, and we can see that it needs a lot of work. And I said, what about grants? And I was told Housatonic Waterworks can't get grants because they're private, whereas Great Barrington Fire District can. And that's because it's as it's stated in your PowerPoint, it's actually quasi-public. As a matter of fact, their board appears with the Selectboard, I think once a year. A private company wouldn't be doing that. And so I find, you say here it's private, in parentheses, semi-public utility. That doesn't make any sense. It's one or the other. You could say it's quasi-public, you could say it's private, but you can't say it's private and quasi-public. So I just wanted the viewers of this, or the listeners of this, to realize there are advantages the Great Barrington Fire District does have, as it is under the town of Great Barrington, not as a separate department, but the town of Great Barrington is involved, whereas with Housatonic Waterworks, it's purely private, which puts Housatonic Waterworks in a vulnerable, puts Housatonic Waterworks customers in a very vulnerable position. But I just wish there was more clarity in these presentations as to Great Barrington Fire District, or at least have Great Barrington Fire District come and present. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. What else? Seeing no one at the next meeting. Oh, I have a hand up. Jean Vaughn.
Unmute. Yes, I'm Jean Vaughn, 91 Van Duzenville. I'm a Housatonic Waterworks customer. If we're looking at option 2, where the Great Barrington Fire District Water Company merges with Housatonic Water or takes it over or whatever, and we're talking about the increased cost to the Great Barrington, community, and how would the local town people, and why would they ever go for it? Is this something that the individual residents would get to vote on, or is this something that our elected representatives can make a decision about, because it is the right decision to have it be taken? It is the only possible decision, is to have it taken over by the Great Barrington Fire District. To me, there is no other option. So is this something that our elected officials decide, or is it something that goes out for everyone to vote, which makes people even more vote in their own personal best interests, I think, rather than when you let elected officials do it, I think you get a more broader outlook as to what the benefits could possibly be.
So the answer to that is to stay tuned, because the whole process piece is something we have to research and discuss. Tonight, we're just discussing the presentation here. So that will come.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Are we asking questions?
Yes, absolutely.
I have a few.
Yes, go ahead.
I hope some of these aren't foolish, but I gather you think the $31 million estimate is accurate-ish?
When I saw that number, I mean, it was in the same order of magnitude when you look at something 4 years ago at 23 million. I mean, if somebody said it was $2 million, but the average pipe life was put in 1958, I'd say, doesn't feel right. You could argue whether it's 10, 15, 20, 30, but order of magnitude, I feel like it's pretty accurate.
Most of these questions, I think, is really just confirming I'm hearing you right. You have two options: Housatonic Waterworks continuing on their own, or combined with the Great Barrington Fire District. There isn't another outside of the box option you can think of?
there's always more options. I just want to clarify, when I say management alternatives, I say Housatonic Waterworks is a single utility and Housatonic Waterworks with Great Barrington. Who owns that utility and who manages it, to me, is somewhat irrelevant. The unit cost conclusion is what leads us to not liking one of them just based on numbers. I'm sure there are others, Ed. I don't know off the top of my head. I mean, that entity up there could become public, right, on its own, and they could seek loans and grants as Great Barrington Fire District has done as a semi, kind of public utility, and they're all over Massachusetts, so there's precedent for it. I'm not sure it's going to change the numbers. It might reduce the net loan amount through the grants, but it's still pretty ugly on its own right.
This one could be, again, more of a regulatory. If the $31 million upgrade will come from ratepayers, whether it's current Housatonic Waterworks ratepayers or combined water company ratepayers, doesn't that mean it won't reduce the value of the company to a buyer, because the company doesn't have to come up with the money the ratepayers do? Does that make sense?
I don't know, honestly. On that side of the value and how the economics would work, I honestly don't know the answer.
Okay, then lastly, and again, this is also probably regulatory and not engineering, if no one steps in and does this, if it continues to go along, and I promise people who's talking, I'm not suggesting this, but if it just kept limping along like it is, and the rates skyrocket well beyond that affordability red line of yours, at some point does the state step in and say this is untenable?
They could. I mean, my guess is that absent some form of action, that the capital plan or some significant portion of it would continue to be deferred. So I don't know that absent any intervention, I think that the rate structure probably wouldn't change dramatically. It's a better question for Housatonic Waterworks and their correspondence with, Mass DEP in terms of their regulatory input. I mean, that's all public record. And again, I don't want to say I would not want to be a small utility nowadays. I mean, we're facing double-digit just general inflation, and average water and sewer inflation per year is like almost 7%. It's generally 2 or 3 times general market inflation, which it's tough. And I know that you have staff in this town that have also struggled filling labor positions for qualified operators. So, it's not an enviable position, but I can understand why you're here tonight on behalf of those Great Barrington residents to try to help. I just wish we had a better answer, but it's black and white, and it's neither alternative is amazing. Far from it.
Thank you.
I have a question as well.
Go right ahead.
And I didn't, unless I missed it, I'll admit math was never my best subject. Why? I don't think you said why the rates would be so much higher. I know you said they would be higher for Great Barrington if they combined, but did you say why? If you did, I missed it.
Yeah, I was going pretty fast there through a whole bunch of math slides. Justin, order of magnitude, how many EDUs or equivalent dwelling units are in Housatonic versus Great Barrington Fire District?
Yeah, so add up. Just to give you a sense, Housatonic Waterworks has about 1,000 EDUs, and Great Barrington Fire District has about 3,300. So almost 3 times as many users or EDUs.
So if we, Garfield, if we spread the, a $25 million capital plan over 1,000 customers, it's just a huge unit cost per household. You go up to 35 million in management alternative 2, but you're spreading it over 4,300 customers. The math is still ugly, but it's borderline doable, especially if you can get long-term low interest loans and really good grants. But that's why the step increase for the Housatonic on its own is so dramatic. There just aren't enough customers to spread that debt.
Okay, well, didn't you say if you have more people, there'd be less debt, if you will? If we're combining Great Barrington, why would Great Barrington be paying more if you have more people?
under that scenario, you're just looking at the water utility for both entities as a single utility. So you're taking their combined budgets, their combined debt service, their combined customers, and you're blending the costs and the rates and everything else into one hybrid rate structure. So Houstonic goes down, Great Barrington Fire District comes up, but the net is, because there's so many more customers in Great Barrington Fire District, the net is doable, albeit, as you're pointing out right now, the biggest flaw with that alternative is, why do you want to pay more for water if you're a Great Barrington Fire District customer? You know, it's a tough one to sell.
Yes, it is.
Maria Spratt.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi, yes. 15 Cone Avenue in Housatonic. I just have a question. It's more of regulation question, but it's my understanding that we couldn't dig wells because of Housatonic water. So will there be a change to this regulation? Is that an alternative of something that we could do? I mean, a lot of the houses don't have enough land, but what would there be made any changes to that effect?
We'll get back to you on that because I have no knowledge of that, but at the next meeting, we'll answer that question for you.
Thank you.
Okay. One more. Dagon Diaz.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, I had a question about the Great Barrington Fire District regards to the board members. I might be wrong about this, but wasn't Mercer on that board of the Great Barrington Fire District at one time, or still is?
I have no idea, and that's not really pertinent to tonight's discussion.
He isn't presently.
He isn't presently on it, according to Ed, but that's something we'll have to deal with as we move on.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Anyone else? Okay, we are going to move ahead, and there will be something on the agenda for next meeting, whether we get into a full-blown discussion or whether we set a date for one. We definitely will move ahead with this. This isn't going to stop now. Thank you, everyone. Mark, bridge, road, and project updates.
Okay. Thanks, Steve. Could you promote Sean?
Yeah.
So Sean Van Duzen, our Public Works Director, is here tonight to provide some infrastructure updates, since we have a very aggressive schedule getting underway this summer. So, Sean, you're up.
How's it going? Can you hear me?
Yes.
So I'm going to just give a sort of brief update. I think the last time I was here was probably in June. We've had about 5 weeks of rain, so some stuff's been delayed, but I'll update you guys on a couple projects that are moving forward. We opened the bids for the triplex parking lot project, which includes work on Bridge Street and Bentley Ave, the second week in July. Reifenberg Construction out of New York State was a low bidder at $1.6 million. This project also includes the pollinator installation on the Main Street planters, which we've did the design for 2 years ago. So that work will be starting soon. I have a pre-construction meeting with them tomorrow, and we're expecting the work to conclude substantial completion in November of this year. After that bid, the following week, we had the opening for the project in Rochester Street, Fairview Terrace, Maplewood Ave, Magnolia Street, Elm Court, that project. The low bidder on that was Baltazar Construction, $1.3 million. That project also includes work to extend the trail, the Riverwalk Trail around Olympia Meadows, an extension and cleaning up of the rail trail in Housatonic to the south from Main Street, as well as resodding the Mason Library, which has some areas where grass has not grown since construction was done there a long time ago. So that'll be good to get those projects started. The completion of that project is also expected to be in November. We have the bidding project for Berkshire Heights, Barrington Place, Pleasant View, Haley Road, and Highland Drive done and ready to go out. We're just waiting to see where we are at with numbers, what's left over from those two previous paving projects to see how much of that we can get done this year, and or if we can do additional work. EDM has completed the bid documents to do repairs to the transfer station compactor as well as the police station generator. So that will be, those projects will both be bid out this month. Beta Engineering is doing the bid documents for the crosswalk safety project on Main Street. Hopefully we'll have them done in the next 6 weeks or so. I'll be coming back before you guys to get a approval for the long term, the fix there in the crosswalks. We got an updated schedule from the contractors. They're doing the front steps at Town Hall as well as the Taconic Ave retaining wall. The work on the front steps here is scheduled to start September 14th. The work will be concluding around the 1st of December. So it's going to be several months of the entrance to Town Hall not being able to be used. Additionally, the work on the Taconic Ave retaining wall is supposed to start the end of August or first week of September, and that will be concluding the end of November as well. We, as you guys can see, we got the furniture delivered from DBE, which is in the select board meeting room now. So when we do come back to full-time meetings, there'll be new seats for everybody. LLB Architects is working on the Ramsdale Library entrance, the ADA entrance, and then we'll hopefully have that project wrapped up by early winter and have some rough numbers in terms of what it'll cost to install the ADA entrance. Work on the CHP trail along Route 7 is stalled, both because of rain and because Mass DOT has not approved the set of drawings we submitted to them 6 or 7 weeks ago for approval for the retaining wall. So as soon as the drawings come back approved, we will commence construction on the retaining wall and hopefully get that done. Also moving forward, Force Engineering is close to completion of the design for the upgrades at Memorial Field, which will be substantial upgrades with new backstops, new ADA access, and some new dugouts and improvements to the infield. They also have the documents close to complete for the 2 softball fields at Olympia Meadow. Also up to bid right now is the replacement of the Christian Hill culvert, which is a culvert that we discovered was compromised, actually made of stone when we repaved that road several years ago. So that's up to bid right now. We're anticipating a spring start on that project because I don't think we'll have time to get there this fall given the delay in materials. So that's a brief overview. Oh, the one thing I did skip, which I'll mention again, the notice of intent has been submitted for Division Street Bridge. We're hoping to go out to bid for the bridge replacement project this fall and start this winter. So hopefully next year at this time, the bridge will be open to traffic again. So those are some of the large overviews. If you guys have any questions, I'm more than happy to answer.
Well, just on the Division Street Bridge, just to be clear, that's the temporary structure.
A temporary permanent structure. So it's a temporary bridge, only 1 lane, but they have a life expectancy of 30 to 50 years. So when Mass DOT comes into, if they get a grant to a TIP grant to replace the bridge fully with 2 lanes, that'll be great. They can take that bridge out. We'll take that bridge out and utilize it on another section of town. It's an asset we'll own. MassDOT has said they will come in and do a 2-lane bridge with sidewalks, but we don't know the timing of that. So we're moving forward with this fix now.
Thank you. Anyone else? John, it's good to see you're not bored.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. And we'll have Sean back probably in about a month with more updates. I was saying 6 weeks, but I think there's so much happening, it'll probably be 4 weeks. Thank you very much, John. Mark, anything else?
No, that's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, under new business. Introduction and consideration of Mass General Law, Chapter 59, Section 2A, which would allow the town to take growth on real estate between January 1st to June 30th and not just before January 1st. So if you can promote.
I don't have co-host rights, not under this. You do. So Ross Vivori, our principal assessor, is here to walk us through this one.
Do you want this back for the regular meeting?
Sure, I can pass you this one.
Okay, Ross, I've promoted you, and if you just unmute yourself and you could give us an explanation of this, please.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
There we go. How about now?
We can hear you.
Okay, great. Thank you. So basically, the reason I'm proposing this adoption is it allows us to take growth beyond 1 January. Right now, technically, from an assessing standpoint of view, if, say, there was a home built, if it wasn't there on 1 January, I would not be able to take it as growth until the following year. By adopting this clause, okay, we can take that growth anytime between 1 January and June 30th. And as you probably know, I mean, growth is critical to the community and its finances. It's actually a line item on the levy limit we submit every year. And it's critical to the finances, and I would hope that you would adopt this.
Do I have a motion?
To accept what we're doing?
Yes. Chapter 59, Section 2A.
What you said. So moved.
Do I have a second? Garfield, Eric, do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Garfield. Questions?
I got one question, Steve. I guess on it definitely makes sense. I'm just curious how that growth would be captured. Is there that if somebody has a building permit, there would be is every building permit that's open, he's gonna go and check it once a year, say right before the end of June? Is that the general plan, or?
Well, we reject all building permits that come down. So we'll go out throughout the year. We're doing permit inspections, and depending on the state of completion, it'll determine whether we're able to take growth on it or not.
Yeah, but I guess doesn't. I understand what the goal is. I guess I was just curious. Some of the bigger projects sometimes last more than a year. I guess you would just schedule a walkthrough every 6 months on, say, a bigger house or a commercial structure or something like that. It would be a set appointment for you.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, if it isn't complete, we wouldn't be taking growth on it. We obviously would capture value. We wouldn't necessarily capture growth.
Oh, okay. So it is upon completion of total project, not midway through a project. I understand now. Thank you. Yep. Thank you.
Michelle LeBear.
Hi, Michelle LeBear, 70 Division Street. This is more technical. Also, I'm interested in this because I'm also a finance committee member. I could not understand a word that was said. So I don't know if other listeners had any trouble. I heard nothing. It was broken up all the way through. So I just wanted to point that out.
Okay. Do you want to quickly just explain that again?
Sure. Basically, adopting this clause allows us to capture growth from January 1st to June 30th. Technically, as it stands right now, we're only taking growth at least on what's there on 1 January.
Did you hear that, Michelle?
Barely. Again, don't worry about it. Just curious, because if I can't hear it, I'm sure there are other people in the audience that couldn't hear it either.
We could hear it, but you're probably right.
But it was really broken up.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Anyone else with questions? Okay, we have a motion and we have a second. It's a roll call vote. Garfield?
Aye. Excuse me.
Eric?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. And aye, it's unanimous. Thank you very much.
Thank you, gentlemen.
You're awesome. We need a motion to appoint our election workers.
So moved.
Do you have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? So I have a motion by Ed, a second by Garfield. Roll call vote. Garfield?
Aye.
Eric?
Aye.
Ed? Aye. And aye, it's unanimous. Mark, you want to handle the 79 Bridge Street tax increment financing agreement, or Chris?
I'm actually promoting Chris right now.
Okay, it's good to see we gave you some power again.
There we go.
Chris, do you want to review this, please, for us?
Sure. Hi, everybody. It's really just an announcement to the public of what the board accomplished in its executive session at the last meeting. So just a disclosure that the board did approve a tax increment financing agreement for the hotel project at 79 Bridge Street.
Next step is state approval.
Yeah, the next step would be state approval, and if anybody wants to see it, it's part of the packet. It's online on our website. Thank you, Chris. Next is citizen speak time. Dan Weil.
Good evening, gentlemen. That was a really nice and efficiently run meeting. Thanks, Steve.
Thanks, Dan.
I have a couple of questions. And I hope oh, good, Chris, you're still on. I attended the Brownfield community meeting last week, and I have two questions concerning that. One is, I was surprised that there was only the select board present, and I wonder why. And perhaps you'll bring this up for discussion next time. Why that was the only board? It seems to me that it was also falls under the purview of Board of Health and Planning. So I don't know how. I'm curious as to why there is one single board taking care of that problem, and also what is the phased schedule for reviewing the other three properties that are cited as brownfields in our town. So, Chris, you're on the hot plate.
Chris, you want to answer that, or you're muted, Chris?
I'm just as happy to have a discussion next week. If you put it, I'll put it on the agenda for 2 weeks from now. But
the short answer is that the entire community was invited. I think it was convenient that for the select board that it was on a Monday night, which is the usual night. So I want to say it was more convenient for the select board and maybe less convenient for others who don't meet on Monday nights. It was an open meeting.
So there's no board that oversees this. This is administrative organization out of your office, Chris. Is that it?
We do not have a brownfields board. No. So I think we view it from the staff perspective, and the select board would view it in terms of their priorities as an economic development initiative, as cleaning up brownfields and trying to get them back to a beneficial use.
And the second part of that question, Chris, which you may not be able to answer tonight, is the other three brownfield sites. Nan asked if we had a timeline for it.
There's three that we're looking at: Cooks, Reeds, and Carpenters. I'm not sure the timeline discussion that you're. What's the question?
I researched on the DEP or the EPA, the DEP database website, and there are 3 other properties, maybe 4, but I don't have that spreadsheet in front of me, but that are designated brownfield sites in Great Barrington. So so I want some reassurance and some information about how those how the investigation about the state of those properties is proceeding, and if there is a calendar timeline for it.
I'm not sure which property, so
I'll send you an email.
Maybe this is something to discuss another time. I'm sorry. I'm not following which properties you're talking
about. The only ones that we talked about the other night, and the only one that were on our radar right now are the ones that we own or are imminently going to own because they're in tax, purchase. So if there are other ones and they're privately held, those are not something that we're looking at right now. That's more of a state issue.
Right. I'm looking at one on Bridge Street, and that's not visible. And but anyway, I'll send you a little snapshot, Chris and Steve and Mark.
Thank you, Dan.
And then we'll move forward on that.
Thank you, Dan.
I think it's important. My whole issue is that I think it's important that the Board of Health be involved in this, and if there are boards that are going to provide some input or enhance the discussion, I think it would be great if there was, in fact, a committee formed for dealing with these properties.
Okay, we appreciate that, man. Thank you. Go ahead, Jim. Sorry.
James Bailey, Main Street in Housatonic. Last week, Sean had mentioned that the sidewalk extension in Housatonic was nearing completion. And when I asked him whether it was going to be completely ADA compliant upon completion, he said there was going to be another portion of it going out to bid because we had exceeded our allotted change orders. I had met with Sean, Steve Mack, Mark, Eric Gabriel, and my brother. And at the time, Steve Mack, the engineer from Foresight, had stated that the sidewalks he designed were completely ADA compliant. Turns out that they weren't completely ADA compliant. So this new bid, is that going to be funded? How's that going to be funded? Through taxpayers' dollars or part of that Complete Streets grant? Or how's that going to be funded? It seems to be an oversight or lack of knowledge on the part of the engineer. Is the town going to be liable or responsible for paying for that? I mean, the whole project, as it sits right now, it looks horrible. The edges of the road weren't that bumpy, weren't that uneven. You can't ride a bicycle on the edge of the road because it's uneven. That's just the basic. I find it extremely difficult to believe that in that chain of command there was Steve Mack from Foresight Engineering, the engineer on the project, an assigned clerk of works, Earl Moffett. Mass DOT was involved, and all these things were overlooked.
Well, let me get an answer to that question. Sean's not on the line, but see, Mark, do you know the answer to that?
Yeah, Sean's not on the line, and I'm happy to bring him back at the next meeting. But I just want to remind you that Sean did mention that we are still working our way through the punch list. The project is still at this time.
Yeah, I was under the impression, and let's find out for sure. I thought Sean said last time that there was no extra cost, that they were still going through the punch list. So we'll have this under town manager's report at the next meeting.
Okay, I'm just making mention of this because, as Sean had mentioned earlier, Foresight has been, hired to bring Memorial Field into ADA compliance. It seems kind of ignorant of us as a community to hire a company who couldn't bring a simple sidewalk project to ADA compliance without sending a portion of it back out to bid to bring it in compliance. Am I wrong to assume that we missed something?
I don't want to assume anything, so let's wait till the next meeting and get an answer from Sean on that.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, guys. I know that seems minute compared to what Waterworks, but thank you.
Not at all. Thanks, Jim. Charlie Williamson.
Yes, I have a question. I asked it before, and if the selectman can't answer it, it means you don't know the answer, and it falls back on the taxpayers again. But a town employee embezzled money, and I asked what was the dollar value. I'd like to know how much money we have to make up again as taxpayers for something that wasn't done correctly. Is there a dollar value?
We're completely insured, and as soon as the insurance company pays the town, we'll give you the amount.
Oh, okay, that's a better answer than I got the last time. Thank you, Steve.
Seeing no one else, we'll have, oops, there's a Dan. You want to come back for a second bite of the apple here? Go ahead, Dan.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Okay, that's great. Just as a point of courtesy for everyone else who's attending this meeting, where are the recordings that are being made available? Are they on the Town of GB website?
That's correct. Yes, aren't they?
They're hosted on CTSB's website.
Okay, I'm sorry. They're on CTSB's website.
And organized, well, I'll take a look. Organized according to board, I assume. Anyway, thanks. That's what I wanted to know.
Thanks, Dan.
Have a good week.
You too. Okay, so let's go ahead with select board time. Garfield. You're muted, but I think you said no thank you. You're always polite that way.
Yes, no, thank you.
Yeah. Eric.
I'm all set. Thank you.
Thanks, Eric. I'm fine. And I have nothing else. It's immediate time. Seeing none, by unanimous consent, we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone. It was a very good meeting.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Good night.